Hey everybody, this is Mike Oppenheim, and you are listening to Coffin Talk Interviews with the Living, a weekly podcast that explores how our views on death affect the way we live our life, and this is episode number 150. I have reserved my mother for this episode, and before I let my mom talk, I just want to say the following. I have lived all over the country, and even when I meet people who don't know me, they say I look so much like my mother that they ask if I'm her son, and that's always followed up by some huge super compliment about my mom. And as much as I wish I had like counterfactual evidence about this, pretty much everyone who's ever met my mom likes her, and she's just an awesome person. And so I'm very proud and happy to be her son, and I am excited to interview her. So Mom, how's it going?
Well, after that introduction, I'm like smiling very broadly.
Well, you're awesome, and you created me, and since you created me, you sort of created the show. So we're going to ask you questions about metaphysicality, and then maybe just also talk mother and son in an intimate way that people want to hear and like to hear.
Okay.
So we'll see where this goes. Normal first question, standard, is how old are you? Where did you grow up? And what generation, if any, do you consider yourself a member of?
Well, I'm 76. I grew up in Tampa, Florida, and I am definitely a baby boomer.
Awesome. I agree fully with all three. So let's start with a weird question. And again, I didn't plan any of these. What do you think about Coffin Talk?
Coffin Talk. Oh, is that what this is? I think it's really interesting. I think I'm very proud of you for doing it and continuing to do it. And it's very interesting. I am not a listener of podcasts, though. So, I don't listen to every single one, unlike you and your brother who, listen to all kinds of podcasts. But I think it's such a fabulous idea to ask people about it. And I think everybody kind of thinks about it, but never nails it, which is kind of interesting that you said put it, and at the end, put another nail in the coffin.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think it's a great idea.
Cool. Thanks. And then what do you think about the fact that I am this weird, 42-year-old man now who writes every week about philosophy and also records a podcast about death after volunteering in hospice? Does any of this surprise you? Does it seem very natural to you as a parent who observed me all these years?
I would say it's definitely an easy, evolution of your being. You've always been very... what's the word? You've always found it easy to deal with things that other people find difficult. And you have a tenderness and empathy that I've always been very proud of and happy of. And so, I think it's a natural segue.
Cool. Just curious. I got a couple more of those kind of curious questions, but I don't know when they'll come out. I want to turn the focus more to you now, but I was curious because you're my mom, and I don't know how the hell I got here, and I have children now, so I'm watching them, and I see how nothing surprises me because everything surprises me, if that makes any sense, and I love watching that. So I just think it's cool that I got to have my mom and dad follow me through my life. I hope you both live much longer than you already have, but you're about the same age, and you both have good physical and mental health, and it's a pleasure to have an adult relationship and friendship with you. And that's why this podcast is sort of weird, because I'm going to be asking you about dying, which is obviously one of my 3 or 4 biggest fears all my life is my parents dying, you or my dad or both. And as I get older and you get older, it becomes something I think about less, but it's probably because I'm trying to. There's a weird dance. So my first question for you is, what was it like watching your parents age? And I know that your mom had Alzheimer's, so that's a little bit different. So maybe concentrate more on your father, who died pretty healthy at 92.
Well, I think I'm gonna interject something here.
Sure.
I remember being probably maybe 7, 8, 9, and thinking on big holidays with my grandmother was very special to me, my mother's mother. And I remember feeling really, really, really sad as a child, thinking that she might not be there the next Thanksgiving or the next New Year's party, things where we did. And I came from a very big extended family. And then with my father, it was interesting because he lived so long. He was 92. I was 60 when he died. So I had come to grips with the fact that I was going to lose him. So I started to, I guess, treasure the moments more, the times. We lived in separate cities, but when I would go to Tampa to visit him and I would leave the house and drive to the airport, I would always cry because it's always like, is this, but it's the very end. Is this going to be the last time I see him? But, up until he was 90, I think it was just like, no, he's always, it was like he was always going to be there, but then once somebody goes, it's like you have all the memories and you feel their influence, I guess, more than I don't feel their presence, but I feel their influence. And so there's moments that you come to treasure the memories, even though it just mitigates the sadness by having the good memories, I guess.
That's cool. And so how do you approach your own death, which is very different from asking what do you think is going to happen when you die? I'm saving that for a little later. So how are you approaching the fact that you're 76, your own father lived to be 92, you seem to be in similar health, your older sister turns 80 in 3 days and she's in pretty damn good health. How do you see this all ending for you? Do you?
I've never been afraid to die. And when I was young, I guess I sort of, when I was, 12 and 13, it was about my own death, not about other people's death. It was like, gosh, it might really be better than life. It would be interesting. It would be, nobody telling me what to do kind of thing. So, as a young adolescent, that was kind of it. And then I've just never, I've never been afraid. I watched my cousin. I was in my young 20s, and I watched my cousin who I grew up next door to die. And, there were people, my father was going crazy, his father was pumping on him. And it's like, I just see it as a passage. And I guess I've always seen it, if I'm there, as a passage. I mean, I've always felt the sadness for losing the person, but I've never felt sad that they have lost their life, if that makes sense. It's like, except for children, but people who have lived a life.
Yeah.
He was 18, so, and he had muscular dystrophy. So he was trapped in a body that, I felt like he was finally free. He hadn't walked since he was probably 3 or 4. So I don't know. I just, there's times when I remember with my friend that nobody had talked about it, and I was with her, and I finally said, to her daughter, I said, I don't want to mention names. I said,
yeah.
Has anybody asked her, where she wants to be buried, how she wants, and she was literally, she probably died within the week, and nobody was facing it, her children and her friends. And they said no and no. And I marched I said, well, that's ridiculous. And I marched into her bedroom and had the conversation with her. It was a really good thing because they were going to put her next to her ex-husband. And she was like, no, absolutely not. So, it was a good thing. So, and like with Judy, when I realize that someone's going, I'm very comfortable. Mm-hmm. I guess that's the way to say it. I'm very comfortable with seeing it as a passage and helping them with that passage in any way that I can.
And what about, this has occurred to me only recently, but it doesn't feel unfair that a child doesn't get to live forever with their parents, and it doesn't feel unfair that a parent passes with their child still alive. But I do feel this like bittersweetness about the grandchild-grandparent relationship, because it just seems like it's unfairly short. And so like one of like the more paranoid like thoughts I'll have in my darker, worse moments is like this just like guilt and regret of like even introducing you and Dad to my kids and Sam, my brother's kids. And I know that's stupid, but like, do you feel any of that on your end? Like, do you feel like a sense of like sadness that you're not going to get to see these like little midgets fully bloom?
No, because I think about it sometimes. Like, sometimes I'll think, well, I might see my oldest grandchild graduate, from high school, but I won't see her graduate from college, and I certainly won't see, the younger ones, because at my age, I'm really lucky if, oh my God, if I have 14 years, it would be, so, but I sometimes, think about like how happy, this kind of sounds weird, but how happy I would be if I were still alive. But, well, part of that, though, Mike, it's an interesting question, because it's not a question you would have asked 100 years ago, because people had their children very young. So you were a grandparent and had many more years with your grandchildren.
Yeah, I've thought a lot about that.
Yeah, see, I had you late and you had your children late, considering that, my grandmother probably had her first child. I think she was 19.
Yeah.
It's, I had cousins that were, let's see, my cousin who's 90 just died. And I had others that were even older, that died years ago. So in generations ago, it didn't happen. You had a long time with that older generation.
Yeah, that actually is a really salient point, and I hadn't thought about that.
You also lived next door down the street.
Yeah. Well, I'm staying in hellacious Phoenix, Arizona for you and Dad, so you can thank me after you cross to the other side. No, I'm kidding. You're thanking me all the time by babysitting. But no, for real, I 100% would not be living here if it wasn't for the reason you just stated, which is I feel... Actually, I just told Alana this in the car the other day. I don't know if I feel guilty about it per se, but like when I was a teenager and in my early 20s, I just like would see you guys as little as possible and hang out with my friends. I was like obsessed with friends, and I'm seeing my middle child, my daughter, do this sort of like, I can already see that she's going to be like me that way. And I'm not offended by it, and I get it. It's like normal, but I do think that like that led me to like in my 30s wanting to be closer and to spend more time with you and Dad, to like not just give back, but to like experience the give and take. So I don't know if it feels that way to you at all, but
well, it's, it was always hard, like when you and Sam would come home from college, say, or from when, when you were living, when you first leave, it's like very sad. And so, but then as you're gone a long time, you just, it's like you just wait for the next time, but you're not pining away for it, I guess is the way to say it. So it'll happen. But the other thing is that when like you do live here, it's totally different. I mean, my relationship with your daughter will be very different than the other grandchildren, because it's you just watching somebody change and grow. You're watching you're watching all the little moments that you don't have a chance to. And FaceTime is wonderful, but it doesn't replace that. An hour here, an hour there. And overnight a babysitting. It's just different.
Yeah.
So for that, I'm very grateful that you braved the heat.
Yeah. No, it's worth it. But it is interesting to me because it's like, I don't know. Yeah, it's just interesting. Okay, so kind of on the same, it's a little bit of a different question than one I asked earlier, which was about like, how do you see this all ending? If your health continues to, air quotes, deteriorate at the same rate it has and always will, meaning like, you've had multiple knee surgeries and like, it's harder to like lose weight and like everything's just a little harder every day. And you talk about that and like maybe you get more tired and stuff. But with that said, you're still healthy enough that you can exercise and your mental health is clear and sharp and you do the crossword and people can tell from this interview. So I'm curious if if everything kind of stayed more or less the same, would you still want it to end at some point, or would you just be like, nah, I'll totally keep living in this state for as many years as I get?
Oh, gosh, an interesting question.
Hey everyone, if you're a fan of the show, please head over to mikeyop.com and click the subscribe button. It's the best way to support us, and it's free. That's MIKEYOPP.com. Thanks.
I think, well, one thing is if my mind goes, I don't want to live.
But I'm saying assume it does. Assume your mind stays. That's what I'm asking.
Assuming my mind is, and that I'm not bedridden, I don't want to see a wheelchair because I could be happy in a wheelchair. But, I don't want to be wetting myself and being in. I don't want to be an invalid. Mm-hmm. I don't want to have to rely on someone to take care of me. I'm happy to move slower. I'm happy to, relax some of my, crazy OCD. but I'm not, I want to be independent. So I guess I just have to see, and if my mind were to go or start to go, I would really, quickly make plans for, making sure that I wasn't a burden to somebody and making sure that I could die when the time came. I'm not sure I would do assisted suicide, but it would be very tempting. And so if I knew that I was going to lose my mind, I might do that. If I knew that in a year I would not know you, I would try to end my life before that happened, or before I was sitting in a wheelchair in a nursing home and I couldn't eat and somebody had to change my diapers. I mean, that's, to me, death is much preferable. Whatever happens on the other side, it's got to be better than,
No, I'm with you. I did hospice. I literally did what you just described with hundreds of people. So yeah, I remember putting my hand in front of a patient's mouth so that she wouldn't keep spitting up her eggs because we had to have her eat, because if we don't get her to eat, we're not fulfilling the tenet of hospice. And I remember just thinking this feels cruel, but her family asked for this, and I can't, I don't know what her ethical religious standards are and stuff. So hospice is a very strange concept in any culture, but I think in America it's extra complicated.
Okay.
I think this is a good time. I'm not trying to rush you or anything, but I think this is actually a good time to ask the quintessential podcast question, which you haven't listened to all 149 episodes before you, but you've listened to at least 50. So I'm sure you've thought about this. What do you think happens when you die?
Well, I have, because I have listened to them, and it's an interesting thing because in my life I have vacillated. That was what came to my mind at the end of my mental exercises with it. I have vacillated to it's a nothingness, to, rotting in the ground or burning, to thinking that maybe I just become, a cell in the ocean or whatever, merge, to thinking that maybe if I was enlightened, there would be something, great. It's really funny because it depends what day you're interviewing me, what I might say, I think happens after you die. I hope that whatever it is, that it's, and I do think that whatever it is, it's peaceful. That at least the transition, the passage can be for most people. That's what I would hope for me, that the passage is peaceful. And then whatever happens, happens. And, I'm, as a friend of mine who was dying and someone asked her, what do you want to come back as? Because she did believe in reincarnation, but she also believed in, atonement and self-realization. And she said, oh my God, I hope I don't come back. So, that I guess I would say, I hope I don't come back. But,
that's very funny.
And then sometimes I feel that I do get messages from the other side from people. And so that makes me wonder, and I know there's such things as ghosts. So that really then makes me wonder. So I'm all over the map with it, Mike. I just really, but in one sense, I mean, it's an intellectual curiosity for me, but it's not a spiritual angst kind of thing. It's just more, gosh, I wonder what it's like.
Yeah.
I wonder what it'll be like. I wonder if, the wind that came when we buried my father. It was a very hot, still day in the cemetery in Florida in June. And when the last, he had the horns because he was military and he had everything. Anyway, when everything had finished and they were going to lower the casket and we're sitting there, all of a sudden this big wind just came through the tent, the opening. And we just looked at each other. Well, Sam was there and my sister. And it was like, my thought was his spirit has left.
Yeah.
That was just my feeling.
No, that's so beautiful.
Yeah. So whatever happens, I think it's okay. I guess that's the way. I just think it's okay. And that, my life has been so blessed. I just think that whatever happens will be a blessing. Will be just it's just taking another step in a different direction.
That's cool. And I think it's funny because I'm probably going to title this episode, I Have Vacillated, because you haven't just vacillated with like, what do you think is going to happen when you die? You've also vacillated immensely in like your habits and lifestyle and choices. So for people listening, my mother was, I guess, technically raised Methodist, but I don't think you were practicing by the time you were a teenager and for sure when you were in college. And...
Oh, wait. You don't know, Mike. You want to know?
Yeah, go ahead. Go.
Okay, so I was born and baptized in a Methodist church. I was very involved in Methodist youth, and but there was a point where I became agnostic, like around the time that I was thinking about death, 12, 13, early teens, and then at 18 I even taught Sunday school, and then by the time I was 21, I was back to thinking that, this was all just horsewash. And I actually wrote a letter to the Methodist Church to take me off their rolls. That was the only way you could not be Methodist. And then I started, more with the spiritual path. And then I, became more with the Vedic traditions. And then I converted, and I spent a year with Rabbi Davis converting to Judaism, which felt natural because I'd always had trouble with the concept of Jesus being someone that was between me and, a deity. Mm-hmm. And I had always, even when I was young, I had Catholic friends, and I thought, why do you need to pray to Mary? Just pray to God. And that was the same way. So becoming Jewish was kind of a relief that it's just me and my God, and now I'm somewhere where all man-made religions they're man-made. And I just think that, I have a very kind of a spiritual side which I think I've always had, but it's personal, and I don't think I actually believe in a personal God.
Yeah. And so I try to explain to people, like, my parents, like, raised me with, like, a picture on the wall of, like, this thing, like a quote from Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, but then, like, my mom also told me to, like, say a prayer when I heard an ambulance, and then, like, it's just, everything was all over the place, and then, like, you guys moved to this, like, small town in Iowa where a bunch of other meditators of your branch of meditation, transcendental meditation, lived, and then, like, one day I remember flying home to visit you guys, and, like, you weren't eating mushrooms, and you were wearing, like, shirts of colors on certain weekdays and stuff, and then at the point where I was, like, about to say my parents are in a cult, this is, like, really weird, it's a friendly cult, and they don't do anything harmful, but they're in a cult, you pretty much, like, just bought a house in Phoenix and moved here, which is, like, awesome, and then, like, throughout my experiences with, like, my intuitive development work and, like, just everything with my son and the divorce and stuff, and, like, your experiences with, like, being hospitalized on Thanksgiving a couple of years ago. I just feel like I said, you vacillated a lot, and all that leads me to just kind of wonder, like, was there a point to any of it, or was it just all fun? And like, what do you think now? Like meaning like being Methodist, being Jewish, being a transcendental meditator, you know, like.
Yeah, I mean, I think it all goes to show that all this is one, all this is that. That it doesn't matter, you know, it's all very personal, and it doesn't matter how you come, you know, and I guess what's happened is that everything that was organized about contemplation and a universal God, or, you know, a creator, I think that it's interesting to see how all the different isms have come about. But I think the core is there, and I think I've always had the core, but it doesn't translate into organized anything. And I guess that's what really, you know, hit me when we left Fairfield, is that I no longer wanted to. I just want to do what I want to do in terms of spirituality.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I'm so thankful that you and Dad both didn't pressure me or Sam to do anything. And I've always felt free to walk my walk and have my philosophy, and also to vacillate, which is, to me, very therapeutic.
Yeah.
Now I have some random questions that I wrote ahead of time because I want to make sure I get to ask them in case we have to go. What was your hardest triumph in your life? Meaning like a thing you wanted to quit, almost did quit, or could have quit, but didn't, and then you triumphed.
Something I wanted to quit? I don't know, Mike. Something I wanted to quit, like smoking?
I don't know. I can't answer it for you. I just know, like, you did have a divorce before you met Dad. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, then I guess that would be as devastating as my first divorce was. I mean, he was, you know, I guess we were high school sweethearts, broke up, and then, you know, so that was very hard, but I was always grateful that fork in the road ended up where I am, where I was, you know, afterwards. So that was probably, you know, the hardest thing for me. I was, how old was I? I don't know. Like, I was 21 when I got married, so I was probably like 24. You know, it wasn't long. But, you know, that's why when I meet someone young who's devastated by something, it's like, you know, the sun will come out tomorrow. I mean, you just never know, but I feel there's always hope that, you know, I used to tell you that when God closes a door, he opens a window, or when he closes a window, he opens a door. But see, there I'm referencing God.
I know, I was just about to make so much fun of you. I was like, hold back, Mike. This is your mom, and you're on a podcast. If we were not recording, I would have just made so much fun. Oh, the God that told you to be Jewish and Methodist and move to Iowa? No.
Yeah, so, I mean, but I think let's just say that when the universe, you know, when the universe like slams the door in your face, you don't know that in a week or a year that like you know, the sun's going to come out, and that like it's just going to be, you know, I mean, I once talked somebody out of suicide, and she went on to meet someone, you know, be incredibly happy, have children. For the most part, most people will come out to find, you know, joy again.
Yeah. And so I have a feeling you're not going to have an answer to this one either, but it is something I like to ask people I'm close enough to ask. I would never ask a stranger this because it's too hard. But if you have any, what is your biggest regret?
My biggest regret? Having children. You know, you walk into that one, Mike. My biggest regret is, let me think. I don't have a lot of regrets. I mean, I guess because I vacillate so much.
Well, I had a feeling you wouldn't, because I have none. So, well, then let me ask kind of a loaded question, but I think my audience would like to hear it. And I actually constantly ruminate on this about you and Dad with much guilt. How hard was it, and what was it like watching me lose my son to an international abduction the way I did? So, meaning like, the divorce, that's like something a lot of parents have to watch their kids go through, because 50% of people get divorced. But what happened to me was absurd, and like while possibly predictable by not only your husband, but other people, it still is like out there and weird and just awful. So I'm just curious, like, was that like hard? What was that like?
Well, the hardest thing was watching you suffer.
Yeah.
You know, watching a child go through something that you can do nothing about is one of the hardest things in life. Or watching somebody you love, anybody, you know, go through something that, you know, you can't cook for them, you can't give them money, you can't, you know, there's just nothing you can do. That's the hardest thing.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I just wanted to ask it because I feel like it's worth people hearing. Because I think to me as a parent, that's like it's not a fear because it's like silly for me to paint it that way. But it's the thing, you know, I know that there's going to be like stumbles in all my kids' life and I'm going to have to watch some of them without being able to help and others I'll try to help. But yeah, it always renders me sad and somewhat guilty when I think about you and Dad. And I keep mentioning Dad just because I think it's very important that I don't favor you in like that circumstance like that.
Right. No, yeah.
But also, speaking of Dad, this is my meanest and weirdest question, and it's going to be close to the last one I ask. I know my dad will not care about how I phrase this or how I ask this, but it's potentially hard and embarrassing for you. Growing up, my dad is awesome and I love him, but he also has a propensity to intentionally try to like rattle people, especially at a dinner table, about like their opinions and stuff. And so he has many times in my life said something that was like not just a faux pas, but like very embarrassing. And it was like awkward for me. And I know as his wife, you've probably had to deal with many more than I ever saw, especially like when you're out and all of you and your friends are drinking and stuff and you're roaring 30s and 40s. So I'm just curious, what was it like to stay married to an air quotes embarrassing at times husband? What is that like?
Well, part of it is I learned to deal with my mother who had Alzheimer's, and you learn that you're not responsible for that other person, that you're not the one dressing crazy as my mother or doing something, and you're not the one at the dinner table being an asshole. So, you know, you just kind of pull away. But also there were times when, you know, we had certain friends that were like very liberal, you know, being in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
And I would just like, he'd start and I'd go, oh no, he's liberal baiting again. You know, and it just takes you know, that even if he goes on, it's like, it's understood. And the other thing is, I think, like close friends and most people really understand that a lot of the times it's like an intellectual thing for him. Yeah. It's like, let me see how much I can, you know, get away with, or how much I can, you know, rattle the cage. Yeah. You know, it's not, I mean, he'll, you know, because, you know, he'll say things that, you know, he doesn't believe.
Yeah.
Or at least I know that he doesn't really believe that way. But he will do it just, you know, for the hell of it.
Yeah, no, and it's funny because I'm now married to someone who is capable of doing the same thing, but not intentionally, which is very different. But her mother, who will probably listen to this, and I will ask her when she eventually comes on the show directly to her face about this. So if you're listening, of course, I am thinking of you as I say this. But she does similar things, and it's so funny to like see that in real time because it's just like interesting. And then she tells me that her husband used to do it the same way Dad does. So I can just see like the many layers of this. And I think full circle, the reason I asked it is that I still have trouble with that maxim, that lesson that you've learned, which is like the people you're friends with and the people you're really close with, they don't actually represent you. And like, I would never walk away from a friendship or a relationship with someone because of like these kind of things, but I've seen people like encourage people to and stuff like that. So that's kind of why I asked, because I didn't know if maybe you ever had like a girlfriend take you aside and be like, you shouldn't stay with him, he's blah, blah, blah. Because, and again, just to be fair to my dad doesn't ever say anything like directly actually bigoted or harmful. It's more that he just likes to like ask provocative questions and stuff to people. So I just want to make sure I'm not giving the wrong impression of my dad to anyone listening.
Right. Well, the other thing is I grew up also with my father who would he would embarrass me in different ways. So you also learn. I mean, I remember we were in Antoine's in New Orleans, and I guess I probably was about 12, and my cousin had taken us there. It's a very famous restaurant, and when we finished, my cousin was treating us, and when we're leaving, the waiter comes up and taps my father on the shoulder and says, "Excuse me, sir, but I think you have one of our dishes in your pocket. And he had like, a bread plate or something. He used to take, he would take, he was a big man, and so he had big pockets. And he would take ashtrays and, like a saucer or stuff. And, we'd all just get so embarrassed.
That's so funny.
So I grew up learning to, just roll my eyes.
Yeah, no, that's cool.
I forgot about that memory.
That is so funny. And especially because, like, I knew him from the time I was, like, a little tiny kid, and he still had, like, some of that in him. And also I just, like, hearing his stories about growing up, like, I don't know if it's, like, poverty, but, just, like, a first generation back in the day, like, taking, I think he had a middle school education until after World War II when he used the bill, but
they were very poor, very poor.
Yeah, so
he and my mother both grew up, poor. Depression.
Yeah, we're at the end of the interview. I've asked most of all my embarrassing questions, and you've done an amazing job, and you are interesting because I know you were afraid you wouldn't be. So before I let you have the floor at the very end of the interview, I just would like to ask, is there anything about me that you think is important for my audience to know that you wish I would like say or write about or haven't ever mentioned or anything like that?
I think people should know what a big heart you have. You really, and you have incredible intuition, and when you say be kind or love, it's not, you're not just saying the words.
Oh,
that's how you feel, and that's how you live.
Thanks, Mom. That was really sweet. I was expecting something sarcastic and funny, so that took me by surprise.
Remember, I'm not the funny one.
Yeah, no. I just, So, well, God, Mom, this has been amazing. I love you, and I could talk to you. I will talk to you forever. We're going to talk after this, as a matter of fact, because my mom is still my main editor. Actually, you and Alana are pretty much tied at this point, but my mom has edited every single one of my novels, and not just like partially or half-heartedly. I mean, just to an amazing extent. And you are now editing a piece for me that I'm going to publish tomorrow. And so my point is just, I want to thank you and say how much I love you before I give you the floor. So what would you like to tell our audience?
Oh, gosh. Live life, love life, but don't be afraid of what's going to happen tomorrow, what's going to happen next week, or what's going to happen when, you take your last breath. Just, love and live and be true to yourself.
I love it. And I will paraphrase you for the millionth time, from your lips to God's ears. So everyone listening at home.
Well, that was your Nana Alice.
Oh, that's sweet. Who my little daughter is named after. For everyone listening at home, as always, if you want to support this podcast, head over to MikeyOp.com, where you can sign up for the premium subscription, which my mom signed up for, so why didn't you? And for everyone listening, I have a big heart, and I'm not lying or full of shit when I tell you to be kind and love, because I love my mom, and I love you, and I love everyone who loves everything on earth and wants to stay here and make it a better place. And I love the people who don't, even though that sounds weird. And that's how we're going to end it. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in for another special episode of Coffin Talk, episode number 150. My name is Mike Oppenheim. You've been listening to my mom, Dena Oppenheim, and we will see you soon.
Walking along when I hear this song, and I walk into you, and you see that I do. And I see that you see me, and I see you hear this tune, and I feel that you're near me, and I sing you while the moon. And then I see that you see me, and I see you hear this tune, and I feel that you're near me, and I sing you are my moon. You are the moon. Mm-hmm.